water, the element of change. It cleans and purifies, heals and gives life anew, holds the secret of our oceans, and crushes those who fail to heed its might. Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and today for Weapons Month 4, we're looking at Aquamancers, practitioners of perhaps the most malleable element of the bunch, at least so far as the Taoist philosophy goes. This fusion of hydrogen and oxygen makes up 71% of the planet's surface, and about 60% of our own body mass. Yet it was actually rather difficult to line up entries for, nearly as difficult as for air. As with all the elements, water is as important to prosperity as it is capable of destruction. The advent of agriculture and irrigation was what allowed former nomads to form the first civilizations in history, and in almost every culture you can dig back and find lore on the sacred powers of water. John the Baptist and Jesus Christ used baptism to spiritually cleanse people, symbolically bringing them life anew. 500 years later, Hippocrates wrote on the healing properties of water and its ability to ward off illnesses, and the Nile River was held sacred in Egypt for the same reasons. With this cultural backing, it's easy to slate water as more of a supporting element, but any sailor can tell you otherwise. Even today, with our advanced ships of metal and polymers, the fickle tides can suddenly turn treacherous and swallow ships whole. With the ability to quench thirst, conduct electricity, freeze at relatively high temperatures, and drown any creature without gills, it holds endless potential. Not to mention, as a liquid, it is shapeless, heavier than it might appear, and easily pressurized. However, I want to stick to the liquid for the sake of this week. While ice and water are lumped together in many universes' magic systems, such as Golden Sun and even early Final Fantasy, I don't want this list to become all about ice. Ice more commonly appears as an element in its own right anyway, and I want to give all of the attention to the more aqueous adepts. So let's dive right in. This is a top 10 video game Aquamancers. Aw, chows. They're so cute. They're all so cute and precious. Except that one! Yes, 4,000 years ago, that was one of these. Power of the Chaos Emeralds, I guess, which mutated one of the little munchkins into Chaos, an amorphous being of water-like chaos energy. He's not actually made up of water per se. You see, when production on Sonic Adventure was moved from the Sega Saturn to the Dreamcast, the developers wanted a villain that would look like no other character they made before. Something unique, transparent, a model that could only be rendered on their shiny new console. Thus, Sonic Adventure got a heavy emphasis on water, and the lead villain along with it. But while its body only behaves like water, it also has power over any real water surrounding it. Chaos once served as a protector of the emeralds and the cherubic chows, and also purified the drinking water on Angel Island. But the ancient Echidna tribe sought to take the emeralds for themselves, which would have been fine if they weren't such dicks about it. Seriously, did you need an invasion force to stomp all over the defenseless baby chows? Well, Chaos didn't like this and used the negative energy of the emeralds to fight back, prompting the creation of the Master Emerald to contain his fury. 4 millennia later, Eggman breaks the Big Drip free and uses him in his plan to decimate Station Square. Chaos changes form with every Chaos Emerald he collects, and, well, that's why he's only number 10. I mean, he has a lot of disastrous potential, but most of the time he kinda sucks. He can avoid attacks by becoming a puddle and go on the offensive with balls of water. He can also make tidal waves, and he's a little more versatile in Sonic Battle, but even with 6 Chaos Emeralds, he's not what I would call a challenging boss. Get that 7th Emerald in there though, and Station Square is basically the next Atlantis. Perfect Chaos has complete control over the water, can conjure aqua tentacles, whirlpools and water tornadoes, and jet chunks of asphalt around with pressurized pillars. Anybody who can drown Supersonic is pretty impressive in my book. Just, buddy, you can't bank on having all 7 Chaos Emeralds every time you want to fight. Sonic and the gang spend whole games trying to collect those things. You need to have some special skills without the emeralds, or else how are you ever going to be strong enough to collect them? You know, I actually wouldn't mind seeing Chaos Zero trying to beat the bonus stages from the Genesis games, wouldn't you? At least he's back in Sonic Adventure 2's battle mode, and now he can... fly? Okay. And hey, Metal Sonic got some Chaos power when he was able to do this. So I guess Chaos is doing something right. There's a fine line between cute and annoying. Some characters are so cute, it makes them annoying. And Aquaman.exe is so annoying, he kind of flips around and becomes cute again. Okay, I don't want to be that hard on the little guy. He's a pretty cool net navi based on Aquaman from Mega Man 8, who is pretty cool in his own right. He's also one of the only examples of a technological Aquamancer I could find, even if everything he does is in cyberspace anyway. Aquaman is a Navi of Shuko Kido, Land's first opponent in the Blue Moon tournament in Battle Network 4. Aquaman is set to battle Mega Man until he overhears Shuko and her siblings talking about replacing their washing machine. Aquaman misunderstands, thinking they want to replace him, and runs off crying into the Den Dome's motherboard where Mega Man has to retrieve him. Aww. And actually, Aquaman's tears are so powerful that he unwittingly floods the area, rendering the Dome's servers unusable. So we have Chaos flooding Station Square, and Aquaman flooding the internet. Be prepared, the ability to flood things is a gold star on this list. After explaining the situation, the scheduled battle can proceed and Megs fights Aquaman, whose main weapon is a limitless supply of aqua bombs. I like the concept, since he actually kinda reminds me of a kid throwing water balloons, but in this case those balloons explode violently, engulfing 2 squares in deadly suds and sometimes breaking apart the floor. He also summons large faucets that continually fire jets, effectively limiting Mega Man to the center row where he's easy to hit with more aqua bombs. Shuko and her waterlogged buddy return in Battle Network 6, but this time Shuko is a teacher, and Aquaman is renamed as Spoutman, at least in the English version of the game. I guess a Justice League member filed for copyright infringement. Well, he's still the same adorable little fishbowl as before, but with a few new tricks. He's playable for a little while, he can bring in a big garden hose that fires in a T-shape, and he can just jump to the other side and... cry? Well, I forfeit this match, you win, little guy.
Kombat here! I am a son of Argus. I was not merely declared a god by befuddled commoners, Bullock.
Now this is what I'm talking about. Rain, the purple half-god ninja from Mortal Kombat. Or as some old schoolers know him, Ed Boon's personal troll. Mortal Kombat has a history of convoluted secret characters such as Reptile in the original Mortal Kombat. The original Mortal Kombat 3 would show Rain in the demo and challenge players with figuring out how to unlock him. How do you do it? You don't. He's not in the game. You can't unlock him or even fight him. It was just a way to prolong the game's popularity. You can try to catch Rain, but it always just trickles through your fingers. At least not until Mortal Kombat 3 Ultimate, which brought the purple ninja back with his ability to control water. And lightning? Why does lightning keep showing up where I don't want it to? Well, I guess the idea is that Rain is controlling storms, not just, rain. That's fine, but I wish it just stuck to the H2O. It's kind of keeping me from ranking him any higher. I know Barbaricia had a lightning spell last week, but in her case it was an exception to her otherwise air-based powers. Rain actually uses lightning pretty frequently, which is a shame because his water attacks are even better. Rain can shoot high-pressure water blasts to knock opponents down, and he can also throw aqua bubbles to trap opponents. While his opponents are trapped, he can move them around to set them up for another hit. He also has geysers, and can even melt into water himself and reform on the other side of his opponent, effectively teleporting. Chaos, this is what you should aspire to. Stop wasting your time with these Chaos Emeralds. Then there are his fatalities, which are both brutal and hilarious. One of them has him pressurizing the water into a sword and decapitating his victim. Great, very ninja-like. That same fatality is getting the water around their legs and manipulating the water to break them. Classy. And then there's forcing someone to drink so much water that they burst up like a balloon. That is just fantastic. He may not completely devote himself to one element the way I'd like, but Rain proves himself the prince of... Oh hey, he's actually a prince in his backstory. And he's purple. Oh, I get it.
Rain wins. Friendship. Friendship again?
On the more supportive side of Aquamancy, there's Nami, the Tidecaller. Why am I putting another support champion from League of Legends onto Weaponsmith 4? Well, I'll get to that. Nami is from a race of merfolk called the Mirai, which has survived the treacherous depths of Runeterra's oceans only due to a special ritual. Every 100 years, one Mirai is named the Tidecaller and bestowed the power of the ocean to journey into the most perilous depths and receive an abyssal pearl. The pearl must then be taken to the surface world in exchange for a moonstone, whose magic can keep the darkest beast of the sea at bay for another century. Without this moonstone, the Mirai civilization would surely perish to the dark forces, likely the same that turned Nautilus into... well, Nautilus. But when no Tidecaller emerged, Nami braved the depths before even getting her powers and returned after 6 harrowing days with the pearl. She was then given the Tidecaller's power and sent to the surface, only to find that the land dweller prophesied to bring the moonstone was nowhere to be found. With the fate of an entire civilization at stake, Nami took to the land to find this moonstone by any means necessary. And I gotta say, Nami might be the only character to actually benefit from the lore change, because originally, after all of this, she joined the League of Legends to help find more information. Nami, how is wasting your time in 5v5 arena fights supposed to help when your marine utopia is on the brink of disaster? But I digress. Nami may be a supportive caster, but that doesn't stop certain people from building her as an effective mid lane mage, so long as they're willing to wait in the team builder for a few hours. And despite being a sea creature, using her powers over the tides, she can actually conjure water around her to basically swim on land, because legs are for chumps. Her bread and butter are her aqua prisons, which damage enemies and hold them in place for a few seconds. Even as a support, Nami can be very aggressive by disabling targets for her carry, but with a 50% AP ratio, they can be painful enough on their own with the right items. Using Tidecaller's Blessing, she can add damage to a champion's basic attacks, and Ebb and Flow splashes a stream of water that bounces off of enemies and allies alike, healing the allies and harming the enemies. See, I knew we'd get to some healing waters on this list somewhere. Her ultimate is a tidal wave with a considerable amount of range. Not really the most damaging ultimate, but it has the potential to knock up and slow several fleeing champions and leave them susceptible to your team's finishing blow. And that's kind of the issue with Nami. She's great in team fights and can be built to hold her own as a caster, but it's hard to escape the obvious intention for her to be a support. So, number 7. She may be a fish out of water, but between aqua prisons and tidal waves, she's a tough tide to turn.
I'm Moonlight as a shark collar.
Given my proclivity for League of Legends, a lot of people from the other camp often question where the Dota 2 heroes are. Well, if I haven't made this clear already, I don't play Dota 2 anymore. I mean, I played Dota 1 a long time ago, and I've only played Dota 2 for a small amount of time. I think it's a perfectly suitable MOBA. I just happen to like League more, and even if I didn't, I've been acclimated to League for years, and I can't really justify training to add another time-exhausting MOBA to my life. So when I do happen to know a Dota character, it's usually from Dota 1, and therefore outdated. But for the sake of this weapons month, and one hero I have tried, maybe I can adapt. Morphling is an agility-based hero composed entirely of liquid, brought to this world after escaping its frozen imprisonment on a comet. Well, it picked the right planet to escape to, 71% water, baby! Not only does its extensive influence over water work perfectly on this planet, it also has the deadly ability to mimic what it sees, and what it's seen is years of war and bloodshed. It's probably the best example of the adaptability of water as the Taoists symbolize. Its main gimmick is Morph, which allows it to take points out of its own agility score and pour them into strength, or vice versa, at a moment's notice. This means that Morphling can be zipping around the battlefield doing high damage with its ranged water shots, and when a group of enemy heroes tries to dive into him, he can buff his strength and grow tanky enough to withstand it. Another ability, Adaptive Strike, takes advantage of this with a burst of water that stuns and deals damage based on Morphling's strength to agility ratio. More agility means more damage, but more strength means a longer stun. So it's up to the player to strike a balance and decide what they need more. Remember, a liquid's volume is constant, but its shape can be anything. Adding to Morphling's amazing escaping and ganking potential is Waveform, a move where it quickly dashes forward, doing damage and moving through solid objects. Once it gets its ultimate, Morphling can create a replica of any hero, friend or foe, out of water, and command it to do its bidding. The replicas have 50% of the damage output as the original hero, not bad for a summonable unit, But more importantly, it can go anywhere on the map, and at a moment's notice, Morphling can switch places with the replica, so again, ridiculously multifaceted. Morphling and the replica can stand and fight together, which, if the copied hero was a carry, can be overpowering. Or you can send a faster replica into the fray and take its place to ambush the enemy. Or you can stand and fight while the replica runs, then flush Morphling to safety at a moment's notice. Strength and agility, gank and flee, push and pull, ebb and flow. Morphling is awesome. And I hope admitting that will finally pacify some long-waiting fans of Dota 2.
Radiant structures are fortified.
So we had Rubicante, we had Barbaritia, and now we have Cagnazzo. Nah, Cagnazzo sucks. Leviathan. While characters and settings change from game to game, the summons are usually a mainstay in the Final Fantasy series. It might seem a little weird for me to place a summon on this list, since summons are just usually monsters being harnessed by a summoner. But through the years, Leviathan appeared in a number of forms, and not always just as a one-turn assistant. 90% of the time, Leviathan is a sea serpent of epic proportions, and generally sports its signature move Tsunami, or Tidal Wave depending on the translation, which does heavy water damage to all enemies. It's the undisputed king of the sea, and in earlier titles was the number 2 when it came to the summons, with Bahamut as its only superior. But let's do a quick surf through this serpent's illustrious resume. Leviathan's always massive, but in his first appearance, Final Fantasy II, he actually was an entire dungeon. He devours the party monster style, and they have to dungeon crawl through his intestines. He was first to summon in 3, and generally appears as an optional prize requiring a treacherous side quest and a grueling boss battle. He got another promotion in 4, where it turns out that he not only rules over the entire sea, but is also the king of the Feymarch and ruler of all summons. He attacks Cecil's ship and seems to swallow Rydia, but actually escorts her to his plane to protect her as the last summoner. He proceeds to train her, and if the party can beat him in combat, will offer to lend you a fin in battle. I like his style. He always makes it clear that he's doing you a favor. Oh, and he has a human form in this game, and is apparently married to Asura. And Final Fantasy IV The After Years has Lunar Leviathan, who is just ridiculous. In remakes of 6, not only is he a summon and an Eidolon that you have to fight underwater, his Magicite can teach you the spell Flood, the only water element spell outside of the summons and Strago's lores. He's also a force to be reckoned with in 5, 7, 8, and 9. In the latter, he actually had to be sealed away because an entire village of summoners was unable to control him. You'd think he'd be right at home in 10, but I guess Sin already monopolized sea monstering in Spira. He's also not in 12, but an airship was named after him. No appearance in 13 either, but in 13-2 they mention that he's the fallacy that purifies the water on Cocoon. And we've already seen him in trailers for 15, looking pretty swag. So on the surface it seems like Leviathan retired after the PS1 days and is taking it easier in the more recent RPGs. But dive a little deeper and check out the MMOs. In Final Fantasy XI, he's one of the 6 celestial avatars, and the old snake has some new tricks. Tidal Wave, of course, some water spells straight out of Final Fantasy X, Spring Water where he finally dabbles into some aquatic healing, and Grand Fall, an immense hydraulic force that crushes a single target. And in Final Fantasy XIV, he's a primal that has been terrorizing the seas. A special ship, the World Eater, has to be specifically designed with a dampening machine to cancel out his tidal waves, and if he damages the machine during the fight, he'll be able to obliterate the entire party in one move. As a wise bard once said, sometimes you have to get on the boat, but even then, don't get on the boat. You have to, but don't. For 20 years, every time a Final Fantasy party gets on a boat, it's almost certain Leviathan's going to pop in and say hello. You gotta love a game where the opening level has you casually murdering the god of the sea. Well, I guess I wouldn't say casually. Poseidon puts up one hell of a fight, and God of War 3 wants you to know that this time things are serious. Though, can I use Poseidon? I mean, only characters originating from video games, that's the rule. Well, let me clarify. The Greek gods have been in story since the classical era, but with God of War, these ancient figures are used as a basis for new characters, with the game's own interpretation of their personality, appearance, and abilities. It's the same reason I can list Lu Bu from Dynasty Warriors, but not Thor from Marvel vs. Capcom. Thor is a new interpretation of the ancient Norse god, but it's the same interpretation made in Marvel Comics, the same character, so you can't say that this Thor is a video game character. I gotta say though, I like the way they did Poseidon. At the start of God of War 3, Kratos has rallied an army of titans and is scaling Mount Olympus. Standing against them is Zeus and his entourage of gods, and while the other gods all have a hand in this fight, it's Zeus's brother that really shines in fending off the titans. He jumps into the sea and uses it to take the form of a giant himself, and when I say giant, I mean bigger than the titans. He proceeds to start using tendrils of water to effortlessly pull the titans off the mountain. As Kratos fights to protect his immense friends, Poseidon conjures the water into these huge horses with crab legs. Hey, it's the ocean, he can do whatever he wants with them. Actually, the reason for this is that besides being the god of the sea, Poseidon was worshipped in ancient Greece as the god of horses. And actually, in Seneca's play Phaedra, this is the same method he uses to kill Hippolytus, the son of Theseus. Fun fact. So these equestrian aberrations attack you with hooves and crab-like appendages made from the stone of the ocean floor, all supported by a skeleton of tumultuous saltwater. When crab horses aren't enough, giant Poseidon finally moves in to attack you with waves, horses, a stone trident, and lightning. Damn it, Poseidon, you were doing so well! I was even trying to overlook how much stone was used in your giant ocean chariot thing. Just why the lightning? That's Zeus's thing. Maybe Zeus lent him some thunder. Well, I know it's petty, but while the ocean gives Poseidon all of his strength and size, and supports his entire war form, the large amount of earth and lightning here leaves me a little too salty to place him any higher. Regardless, this is how you start an epic hack-and-slash game. Poseidon would have been invincible if Kratos hadn't finally separated him from the ocean, and after he's killed, he goes out with basically the hydraulic version of an atom bomb. An excellent way to get your feet wet.
Dance, water, dance!
Oh no, not again. The growing concern with Elements Month is that it means a few key franchises are going to keep reappearing. I know I'm guilty of reusing certain franchises over and over already, but when one game has a character that completely specializes in a single element, it's often because there are characters for all of the other elements as well. Case in point, Kingdom Hearts dominating Weapons Month 4. Not even Kingdom Hearts, Organization 13 dominating Weapons Month 4. But what can I do? The evil team is filled with superpowered nobodies with elemental themes, and I don't think anyone better holds to an element than Demyx, the melodious nocturne. This isn't even his first time in Weapons Month. He was number 2 on my top 10 musician fighters, and unlike Zelda, that doesn't mean I should rank Demyx any lower here. He really does marry his musical fighting style to his Aquamancers seamlessly. The two are completely in harmony. Since I talked about him before, I'll try not to retread, but despite his lazy, wishy-washy, zero-ambition personality and his insistence that he shouldn't be the one fighting, he was probably the single hardest fight for me in Kingdom Hearts 2. This is partly because he's the first member you have to take down, and that he's just really powerful and has a wide berth of moves, from his waveform dashes, to his geysers, to his bubble beam on steroids. The other side of this is his ability to conjure liquid doppelgangers to attack you. When he does this, a minigame starts up, wherein Demyx is invulnerable, and you have a limited amount of time to kill all of the Aqua clones before you instantly lose the fight. Why? Last time people in the comments gave me flack for having trouble with this, and yeah, you have to tailor your abilities and movesets to handle it. With the right combination of moves, it can be pretty manageable. But why does this kill me? Why does my mortality suddenly hinge on immediately exterminating these puddle people? They don't even attack me. Are they playing a death song or something? Am I drowning? What is the logic in this insta-death? And despite how annoying this fight is, despite how much worse the freaking data battle is in Final Mix, and despite him being a lame, selfish, mullet-topped aqua hippie, why do I actually kind of like him? Yeah, I actually really like this guy as a character. He's probably one of my favorites in the organization, and his moves are really cool. The sitar is a neat concept that is really well executed from a visual standpoint. And it's kind of funny having a character in this ultra-intense villainous team who's actually nice to the good guys and would rather be home jamming out and eating chips. he's oddly relatable. Demyx is an Aquamancer that goes with the flow and takes things at his own pace, whether that means a sudden rapid attack at Sora or shirking his responsibilities altogether. So when Demyx constantly yells,
Like it?
between pummeling me with torrents, it's actually a more complicated question than I thought. And we didn't even need to know anything about him pre-Nobody to know where this guy was coming from. There could be something there, though. I don't suppose Xehanort would have found him suitable for the 13 Pieces of Darkness, but maybe we can get some more Demyx in Kingdom Hearts 3? Just, for the love of God, no time limits. Kyogre, I choose you! And why wouldn't I? With the highest special attack, special defense, and base stat total of all water-type Pokemon, this Generation 3 Legendary is the undisputed king of the sea. Generation 3 was when Pokemon plots started to really revolve around the mascot legendaries, which were now comparable to gods. Kyogre himself is inspired by the Leviathan, a giant whale from Hebrew scripture, and I'd say Kyogre is a more faithful adaptation of the Leviathan than Final Fantasy's Leviathan. In ancient times, Kyogre battled with Groudon for dominion over the planet, Kyogre basically being the living embodiment of the ocean, and the world was nearly destroyed in the clash before Rayquaza intervened. Millennia later, Team Aqua wakes the sleeping giant in a strange plot to create more environments for the planet's water Pokemon. Kyogre wakens, and its latent strength causes a rainstorm of biblical proportions that threatens to flood the entire planet. The Cataclysm reaches new heights in the remakes, where using the power of the Blue Stone, Kyogre reverts into its true form, Primal Kyogre, which makes it even more unstoppable and brings the storm down even harder. Great plan, Archie. I can see you really thought this through. Most legendaries are banned in competitive play, but in the GBA era, Kyogre was placed in the don't even think about it tier. Pure water types are already pretty reliable for having only 2 weaknesses and 4 resistances, but this Orca also sports more than generous defense and special defense. It also has a solid move pool with great coverage, including Thunder and Ice Beam. But remember, coverage isn't why we're here. For its water-type attacks, you have the always popular Surf, Aqua Ring for healing over time, Water Pulse that can confuse enemies, and the shiny new Origin Pulse, and the risky but rewarding Hydro Pump. But the way I see it, the only Kyogre done right is packing Water Spout, a move reserved for only the most massive marine life. It gets less powerful as Kyogre takes damage, but at full health, it's rocking an unprecedented 150 base power with 100% accuracy. Factor in the godly special attack and the 1.5 times stat bonus. Not good enough? Let's double it using Kyogre's signature ability, Drizzle, which is probably the most underrated name for an ability in Pokemon history. I mean, look at this! Does this look like a drizzle to you? This is a monsoon! It's a wonder Dewford Town and Moss Deep City aren't underwater already. So with Drizzle, Kyogre's very presence causes a massive downpour, which made Kyogre the reigning Primarch for Gen 3's popular weather teams. A strategy that ruled the meta until Generation 6 and is still kind of around. Other Pokemon can use Rain Dance for the same effect, and some even get Drizzle as a hidden ability, but Kyogre whips it out effortlessly. And while it's not the case anymore, before Gen 6, Kyogre's Rain was permanent until another weather move was used. In the rain, all fire attacks have their power cut in half, and all water attacks are doubled. Doubled! So besides cranking its own hydraulic power to Neptune levels, it makes Kyogre the vanguard for entire water-based teams. It may not last 40 days and 40 nights anymore, but with a Damp Rock, it has more than enough time to wash away the major threats. Did I mention Water Spout and Origin Pulse also hit multiple opponents in double battles? And then, after all of that, Kyogre seizes the blue orb, activating Primal Reversion. And it's okay? Yeah, Primal Kyogre is actually kind of disappointing. If only because Kyogre was so good already. Kyogre gets a small boost to special attack and a much larger boost to its defense, but a lot of precious points are put into attack. For what? Aqua Tail? Primal Kyogre also has Drizzle upgraded to Primordial Sea, augmenting the normal rain into Heavy Rain. It lasts indefinitely now and is harder to clear, but dissipates as soon as Kyogre leaves play. It also has the amazing ability to render all Fire-type moves useless. Wow. I mean, yeah, that's really powerful in real-world logic, and plot-wise, Primal Kyogre is set to turn the entire planet into its own personal Atlantis. But the fire thing is downright redundant. Who is using fire against Kyogre? In the rain! It has a 4 times resistance. Do you really have to add insult to injury by making it 0 damage? Plus, to use Primal Kyogre, you have to give it the blue orb, which means it's not holding something more useful like, say, Choice Scarf or Leftovers. It's freaking hilarious to see Primal Kyogre rolled out for its unholy watery wrath, only to hear so many competitive Uber Leaguers go, I'm good, and take the old model. And yeah, that's the power of Kyogre. It's so mighty that turning it into a primal deity actually made it worse. Still, from a plot standpoint, that's the most powerful water type in the world. So either way, that's a fish you don't want to throw back. All of the mightiest warriors start from humble beginnings. It is the very core of the Darwinian evolutionary theory that our very species, all species in fact, began at the sea. Small, helpless, and kind of annoying. But it was by intelligent design and the survival of the fittest that those mercurial fish would grow legs, finally walk on land, and start kicking some serious ass! I tried to keep an open mind, but as soon as I started working on this list, I knew Ruto would be my #1 Aquamancer. And you wouldn't know it just from looking at her in Ocarina of Time. But Hyrule Warriors revamped the Zora Princess and made her a machine, blasting away hordes and hordes of Stelphos and Bulbins. But what do you expect from a game based on Dynasty Warriors, where all of the characters are unstoppable forces of... Wait a minute. What have I done? I'm not even a big fan of Dynasty Warriors, really. Like most playable characters in the franchise, Diao Chan is a god among men and wipes through them in droves. This is Dynasty Warriors, where the average enemy has the durability and intellect of a piñata. Seeing her tear through hundreds of soldiers might make the number 8 scene a little low for her. I try not to use Dynasty Warriors as a crutch, but sometimes there's a character who stands out from the several dozen Chinese warlords. I might be the biggest hypocrite of all time. No, wait, okay, just don't jump the ship on me just yet. Let me give you my sources. The Zora have been around since the very first Legend of Zelda, where they were the lake-dwelling beasts that breathe fire at our hero. However, that is the NES and SNES, though they also appear in Phantom Hourglass's Black Lagoon-esque warriors. If you consult the official timeline, before the time split we have Ocarina of Time, where we meet Princess Ruto as a little girl, and holy halibut is she a pain in the dorsal fin! She has the sacred duty of feeding Lord Jabu Jabu, the Zora's patron deity and the supposed spirit of the ocean, though you never see him do much but eat people, which is exactly what he does to Ruto. Young Link must rescue Ruto, who complains the whole time and literally does nothing but weigh things down. Jump 7 years ahead, and Ruto becomes quite the catch. Changed by her experience with Link, she's portrayed as incredibly capable, and even though we don't see it firsthand, she's sly enough to be the only one that escapes Ganondorf's icy curse on Zora's domain, and is already braving her way through the Water Temple when Link gets there. Her journey reveals her as a Sage of Water, which is more of a title than an indication of aquamancy, but it does mean that she is instrumental in saving Hyrule. Quick aside, Ocarina of Time leads to 3 splitting timelines. In both the adult Link and Link's defeat timelines, Ruto has ascended as a Sage, and those timelines include Phantom Hourglass and A Link to the Past, respectively. How is it that the only timeline where Ruto stays to become Queen of the Zora is the only one where all of Hyrule's Zoras aren't either extinct or devolved into bloodthirsty river beasts? And I know there are civilized Zora and Oracle of Ages and Seasons that distinguish themselves from the brutish River Zora, but that takes place in Labrynna, not Hyrule. The Young Link timeline leads to Twilight Princess where Zora are still as they were. So I guess Ruto did a pretty good job of things as queen. Now let's look at Hyrule Warriors, because that's really the Ruto we're looking at. Hyrule Warriors is not canon to the Zelda series, but the same doesn't hold true reflexively. In Hyrule Warriors, everything in the canon Zelda timeline is accepted as fact, just with Koei's added embellishments. For instance, they take the phrase Sage of Water less as a religious title and more as Maven of the Tides. That fetal position tween you used to know is gone. Ruto now holds complete control over the waves. Her weapon is the Zora scale, and though the description says that it is imbued with the power of water, I think a lot of it comes from Ruto's sagedom. Using combo attacks feels a water gauge that can be expended to add greater power and distance to several area of effect attacks. Dynasty Warriors and its offshoots are always about clearing out legions of mooks, and in Hyrule Warriors, no one cleans up quite like this AoE Aquan. The Zora have feet that are perfectly capable of walking, but like Nami, Ruto can call the tides around her so that she can swim through the air. Unlike Nami, Ruto swims faster than any boots of mobility would ever allow. Now look at her basic attack. A simple slash, right? But with water. To be able to cut flesh and armor, a huge volume of water would have to be compressed into this smaller volume, making it extremely pressurized. Some industrial equipment uses the same process, and, as you might remember, so does Rain. And while Rain's decapitation is flashier and probably more powerful, it's his fatality and requires a certain amount of focus. This is something you do with Ruto by pressing X. Ruto's attacks grow in flashiness from there, shooting long-range waves in quick succession, creating a sphere of water to swim around in and swirl enemies like ice cubes in a root beer. And I really like this focused spirit where she fires giant fish-shaped projectiles. It's like she wields the power that Lord Jabu Jabu was always rumored to wield. A lot of her attacks also change her position, so she's a slippery fighter to net. Not to mention, she just kind of dives into thin air or into the ground, disappearing for a moment before bursting out of water somewhere else. In Dungeons & Dragons, this would be described as plane shifting, similar to how Axel teleports with fire. I'm not really sure how it works here, but in Dungeons & Dragons it would mean she's briefly traveling through the elemental plane of water to breach out somewhere else in the material plane. That's kind of mixing different game universes, but that's sort of what I do. So great, I managed to justify a character I like. Slow clap. Let's put a few more lead characters on here while I'm at it. I think at this point I can pull out petty resources to support any opinion I ever want to. It's my show, I do what I want. But really, why put Ruto at the top after I just described Kyogre as the foaming titan of the depths? You know? Because I haven't talked about Nintendo games enough? I'm not really sure if Ruto can stand up to Kyogre, though she seems to have no trouble with the dongos. But it's not about who would win. Ruto just displays everything I think water is as a weapon. She's adaptive, she's hard to contain. Not even freezing over Zora's domain could stop her. And sure, Jabu Jabu ate her as a little kid, but as an adult, she's one of the only sages that doesn't actually need Link to rescue her. She takes full advantage of water in all of its liquid shapes, and her mobility. Not only does it help when fighting an enemy general or helping her get out of targeting range, it means she can respond to threats all over the waterfront, leave the frontal assault for a moment to double back and defend an outpost, then turn the tides and push down the enemy's stronghold, attack and defend, ebb and flow. You get what I'm talking about here. She's like Nami, but faster. She's like Leviathan, but with fine control over her powers. And she doesn't need to collect 7 Chaos Emeralds to do it. From power to technique, to just respect for the craft, Ruto is the clear choice for me. I'm the Green Scorpion, and yeah, I think I sailed myself out of this one. Next time, we get to dry land. See you guys then.
Dance, water, dance!